Nothing in there anymore but ice cubes. Hello and welcome, or welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. Today I am going to do the Bring Browsing Back book tag, which was created by Karen at Roving Reader. Now I was tagged by Pat at Book Chat with Pat. Thank you for tagging me, Pat. And this is a nice short tag. There are 4 prompts. I should say that I miss the days of browsing. The kind of browsing one does now at Amazon.com or some other online vendor is very different to the old-fashioned type that we used to do in the stores. And some of these books, which I'm going to show you, came from just such places. The old Crocs and Brentanos on Michigan Avenue, for example. I can think of other Crocs and Brentanos wherein I picked up books which remain with me and have been important over all these years. Of course, one does not generally go to a Barnes and Noble to browse, and I almost never find myself in a bookstore these days. Probably about a year before COVID occurred, I stopped going to the half-price books near me. It had been a regular stop, and I've just never really picked up the habit again. I have gone back to that particular location a couple of times, and they just don't have anything anymore that I want. For a number of years, I went and I would scour the clearance shelves, and anything for $1 or $2, then finally I had to give in and go for $3. That struck me as a possibility, say something with a Penguin cover, something published by Penguin Classics, I would snatch off, or something from the old Harper's, what was it, Harper's imprint, Harper Torch books. In fact, I think I have one here, don't I? Yes, I do. This was a book that was purchased new. Well, I will start showing you the books. And sorry, I'm 3 minutes in and have not really accomplished anything much beyond dithering. It comes with age, trust me. Certain booktubers exempt, I must say. So, number 1, the magic of discovery. Share a book you found while browsing that you may not have discovered otherwise. And I will show you more than one. What was the one I was going to show here? I think it was the one that I've shown a million times on this channel, Ancient History by Moses Finley. This was not the copy that I browsed, and in fact, this is not the jacket that goes with this particular edition. Oh, look at that. Look at that. So I kept both jackets, even though I got rid of the one book. The reason, oh dear, the reason I kept this jacket from the old copy, which also was not the one I found browsing at Unabridged on Broadway in Chicago. I kept this because the subtitle Evidence and Models is very big, which I think is very important. Here, look at that. You can barely see it. So, at any rate, I was a young man, and I suppose trying to find my way in the world, and didn't know anything about history at all. And this book, I've recently read the first paragraph here. This book promised to inform me how we can know what we know about history. And I got the book, and it began a lifelong relationship with Moses Finley. But I thought I would show in conjunction to that a couple of other books which, just for want of anything better to fill the allotted time with, I've wanted to mention this book a number of times. This book is akin to that Ancient History, Evidence and Models by Finley, in that he talks about different approaches to history or for history, and it was a very helpful adjunct to the Finley book. I don't know that I would start here, but oddly enough, Bernard Lewis was an author that I first found browsing as well. I don't remember which bookstore this was in. Hard to believe, but in those days I did buy books new. And it says revised edition. I believe it was revised and expanded since, and I decided when I saw that edition not to pick it up and reread it, though I might. But this is what I was talking about, Harper Torch books. Throughout that period of just willy-nilly trying to build up a little bit of a library of potential reading material, anything by Harper Torch books I would pick up. I have always loved the imprint and what they produced. But this brings me to the third Bernard Lewis book that I wanted to show, which is one that I got from Crocs and Brentano's on Michigan Avenue. And it had been, prior to this, it was published under a different title, and he expanded it and gave it the title Race and Slavery in the Middle East. And Finley, of course, was renowned for his studies into ancient slavery. So it was between Finley and then having come across this book very early on that I think piqued my curiosity into the subject of slavery. I think I may have done a video somewhere here just laying out a lot of my different books about the topic. It has lovely illustrations, I should say, or photos, whatever it is. But I can't see. Here, look at this. Just look at this. I mean, you know, nowadays they won't put plates in a book. They'll just have some kind of black and white reproduction at the level of a photocopy in with the text. I mean, look at this. Just look at this. I mean, my God, what a wonderful book. I would like to reread this at some point. It seems like it's worth rereading. So the book which I forgot to bring out was my third historian from that early period. I think it's K.C. Chang. He was actually an anthropologist. But they, all three were voices that carried me in good stead for those formative years. Bernard Lewis, I went to see at the Field Museum one time, and he unfortunately took a hard turn to the right. I mean, I think he probably always was a rightward leaning, and involved himself with the neocons, the Bush administration, and so forth, very unwisely. And so it left his reputation a little bit shredded. But if you read his older books particularly, the writing is impeccable, so I do recommend him. So that's quite a bit for the first prompt. Number 2, Expanding World. Share a book that has made you view things from a different perspective or exposed you to new ideas. Sorry, I wrote these out in my rude penmanship, and it's hard to decipher. And for that, I would just in general say the books of natural science, which I have been reading since last year. Heidi at My Reading Life, as well as Britta Bowler, kind of tilted me in that direction, watching their videos on natural science topics. And it really has changed my view on things. So last year I read Other Minds. Can't remember the name. Peter something. And then Entangled Life by Sheldrake, I think. Merlin Sheldrake or something like that. So I read those two. At the time, I had a lot of negative things to say about Other Minds. And I of course, had some negative things to say about Entangled Life. But overall, those books have really impressed me and changed my view on life, particularly. The human mind seems particularly comfortable with binaries. So you are raised to believe that, say, eating wise, you have a choice between McDonald's or Burger King. You come to find out that there are other options besides that. And so Entangled Life particularly, I learned that our dichotomy of plant or animal life really does not tell the full picture. There are other varieties of life, probably more than we even can tabulate as yet. And it just reminds me how even such basic binaries as sex, if you will, male and female, a biologist can tell you are not so clear-cut as we or some of us would like to believe. So those books really, Other Minds, he really devoted a good portion at the fore of the book describing the evolution of life, the early forms of life, and then the branching out into the tree of life, as we would call it. And I think about those concepts and scenarios all the time. I mean, and of course, all of my life I had heard about lichen and did not know what they were. I did not realize it was a synchronicity of two different forms of life, fungi and algae, I think, or something like that. And to think of their symbiosis is just ferment in the brain, something to think about constantly. And then this year, I also, not really liking very much at all, I read The Soul of an Octopus by Cy Montgomery, largely devoted to her experiences in various aquariums. But that book as well has left an impression, and continuing from Other Minds, it's left me thinking about cephalopods quite a bit. And then just most recently, I read Braiding Sweetgrass, and unfortunately, the books from last year are down in the basement, and Braiding Sweetgrass, I have no idea where my copy is. It might be there, it might be some other place. I've just never known. It's kind of the trouble with the chaos in which we live around here. Actually, the chaos isn't that bad, but my books are a particular unique form of chaos. But so these books are always in my mind, and I am thinking about them. Number 3, let's move forward. Open to change. Share a book that has changed who you are as a person or altered your day-to-day habits. And I've talked a little bit about Michael Ventura. This is probably my favorite book of his. Some of his columns. Now, his entire oeuvre, he wrote a bi-weekly column titled Letters at 3 a.m. The entirety of it exists in at least 2 separate archives online. I say the entirety, but there may be gaps here and there, but you can find a lot. He is a writer who was particularly apt during his time. This book contains things from, say, 1991. One part that I just opened up and looked to was all about climate change. He was calling it the greenhouse effect and predicting that Los Angeles would be a wasteland in 20 years. He was wrong. Los Angeles did not become a wasteland in 20 years, but he was dead on target with where his concerns were. It's really a marvelous book, but you, as I say, you can find some of his newspaper articles online, most of them, and some of these I think come from other sources, so they're a little bit more extended. But he closes the book with a with a column that was called Solutions to Everything. And it was a summation of wisdom, numbering, I think, 38 items. Let me read you a few from the beginning. It's happened once too often. Somebody says or writes to me, "You talk about what's wrong, but you don't offer solutions." Or, "My girlfriend, boyfriend, lawyer, therapist says you should suggest solutions, not just talk about bad stuff." And maybe they're right. Maybe to detail one's vision and let readers take it from there if they feel like it just isn't enough. Maybe there are solutions and maybe I should know them. So I sat down and thought real hard. And here, numbered for your convenience, are my solutions to everything. He starts with a 0. Indulge in secrets. Without 1 or 2 major secrets, your life will surely fade. If you're over 40 and don't understand this, you're in big trouble. A conundrum. Secrets aren't lies. They're mysteries, havens, passageways. Lies wreck your life. Secrets can save your life. But sometimes you have to lie to keep the secret. And then he starts with number 1. Make mistakes. As Coleman Hawkins said, if you don't make mistakes, you aren't really trying. Number 2. Stop lying about yourself, to your friends, to your family, to your business associates, maybe even to your enemies. Your enemies oppress you as much by your fidelity to your own lies as by anything else. 3. Stop tolerating in your leaders what you wouldn't tolerate in your friends. But, ... 4. Tolerate impurity. Trying to be pure about anything is a way of setting yourself up to fail. Asking other people to be pure is a way of setting them up. Number 5. Read 1 book a month. A book that you didn't find out about in a magazine or newspaper. Browse an independent bookstore and wait till some book says, read me, and read it. So that brings us into conjunction with this tag quite nicely. Now I'm going to skip ahead to number 16, something that has made a huge change in my life from the moment that I first read this. Given that you're living in a city where driving is necessary, learn to drive. You may think you know how, but my experience of the way you drive is that you probably don't. So here's how. Drive for space, not for speed. Space in front of you is the safest thing you can have with a car. Darting in and out of traffic doesn't change anything. It just makes you older. You can't beat the average traffic flow on any given street or freeway by more than 5 minutes, which only makes a difference if you're having a baby. And don't you feel like an idiot when you've passed 6 cars and they pull up beside you at the next light? They're laughing at you and they hate you, which isn't good for you. Drive for space. If the move ain't smooth, it ain't right. There's no excuse for a jerky turn, stop, or acceleration. It's hard on the car. It's hard on the other passengers. It confuses other drivers. It's not aesthetic. Such moves are for emergencies only. 90% of the time, you drive with your habits, not your head. So figure out what your bad habits are. Gunning it through yellows, not signaling, tailgating. Your worst habit will turn into your worst accident. So stop it. Drive for space. End of lesson. That impressed me when I read it. I had already been driving, but I was not driving for space. I was driving for speed, and I can't say that I am 100% on everything. I still occasionally find myself doing the jerky move. So I have room for improvement, to be sure. But that passage impacted me instantly, and I changed my driving habits right away, and I have probably been fortunate to have done so. It reminds me of back in the day when I was working up in Evanston and I was riding a bicycle to and from. The job was in Evanston, my apartment was in Chicago. And this man came up to me, an older man, I would have said at the time, but definitely much younger than I am now. And he said, I used to have a nice job, and I had a wife, and I was riding a bike, and I didn't have a helmet on, and had an accident, and it changed my life, and now I have brain damage, and my wife left me, and so forth and so on. And I took his advice. I got a helmet and was riding with a helmet for the rest of that summer until I had a major spill on Clark Street. And then I said, I'm not going to ride to work even with a helmet on. So when one becomes an old man, you think of some of the things you did when you were young and say, it's miraculous that I got through that. A poet has said we have miles to go before we sleep, but I am not convinced of that. So, number 4 is browse a bookstore, library, or a friend's shelves and talk about a book you found there. Well, yesterday I posted a short video. I had been up in Evanston and came back. I When I am there, I like to stop at Amaranth Books, which was a small independent used bookstore which I shopped at as a young man when I was working there. And it's still in business, the same proprietor. And so when I am up there, I like to stop in, and I inevitably come away with a handful of books. He always seems to have NYRB books marked at about $4. Now, there was another one that I considered titled Sand. I'm not sure who the author was, but it was, instead of $4, he had it marked at $5. I think he might be raising his price. I buy these things just blindly. I know nothing about John Horn Burns, but it looks interesting, and we'll give it a go. Let's see what it says. John Horn Burns served as a U.S. intelligence officer in North Africa and Naples during World War II. He returned from the war to write The Gallery, a bestseller that also earned the admiration of such writers as Edmund Wilson, Norman Mailer, and Gore Vidal. Well, Edmund Wilson counts with me. No other book succeeds so well in capturing the confused feelings of horror, cynicism, rage, self-loathing, and desperate, inarticulate desire with which many Americans emerged from the war. Set in occupied Naples in 1944, The Gallery takes its name from the Galleria Umberto, a bombed-out arcade where soldiers and civilians come together in pursuit of food, drink, sex, money, and oblivion. A daring and enduring novel, and one of the first to look directly at, gay life in the military. The Gallery surveys the devastated world left behind what Paul Fusel calls in his new introduction to Burns's masterpiece, The Worst War in History. Paul, I've heard the name Paul Fusel, I think, but I don't know who he is. But this, a few years ago, one of the first books that I read since I've been logging my books as I try to become a better reader was the sequel that Primo Levi wrote to If This Be Man or Is This a Man, something like that, his book about Auschwitz. The sequel told of his journey upon liberation of the camps, trying to get back to Italy. There was a mass movement of displaced persons all over Europe, and I had never considered that. And so this might tell me a little bit about what he arrived home to. So I really should consider this soon. It's about 340 pages. So we'll see. Let me give you the first sentence of it. Ha ha ha. Oh dear. Well, I see the first chapter actually says first portrait, and it says the trench foot of Michael Patrick. But actually before that, it says entrance. There's an arcade in Naples that they call the Galleria Umberto Primo. It's a cross between a railroad station and a church. You think you're in a museum till you see the bars and the shops. Once this Galleria had a dome of glass, but the bombings of Naples shattered this skylight, and tinkling glass fell like the cruel snow to the pavement. So that's a little more than the first sentence, but I thought since I had already read the back cover, which talked about the Galleria, I would read a little further. Now, I also picked up this, what is it? The Presidential Campaign Biography of Abraham Lincoln. So Steve Donahue mentioned this in his version of the Abraham Lincoln tag, I think it was. I'll put a link in the description. It was circulated whilst he was running for president. And so it is the biography that he approved. And I don't know that it's one of those books. I bought it not necessarily intending to read it. I'm not particularly interested in biographies, but I've always liked Lincoln, and I think it's worth at least becoming familiar with, since I saw it there at the shop. I would not have sought it out on my own. And then I found my James Fenimore Cooper for $1, Library of America edition, and these are early novels of his, and the pilot is some sort of seafaring adventure. That seems to be a theme in my reading this year, so maybe I will get to it. Although I realize just how many books deal with ocean going. When I was young, I read The Sea Wolf by Jack London. Early on, I read different Joseph Conrad things and so forth. And I'm kind of thinking that I should give up the genre. I have volume 1 of that whole big series. I forget what it's called, the Commodore something or other, and picked it up at the same shop within the last year, also for $1. So, but I don't know. I know nothing about this author. I understand that he was once held in the highest regard, and that his star has fallen a little bit. Greg at Another Bibliophile Reads left a comment on my little short and informed me of that. But so I might. I realized after looking him up a little bit that I was confusing him in my mind with Robert Louis Stevenson, which to any literate person probably doesn't make sense. He died around the time that Robert Louis Stevenson was being born, across the pond, as they say, I believe. So that was from that bookstore. I'm going into more depth and detail than you want, but I thought, what the heck, my browsing bore fruit. And I showed this in the little short, The Tale of the Heike, I guess you say. And I said, I don't know if I have this. I think I do. I had flipped it open and I thought, geez, this looks really good. And to clear up the mystery, I do have it in a different edition. Ta-da! So, and I had thought that this one is translated by Hiroshi Kitagawa and Bruce T. Tushida, with a foreword by Edward Seidensticker. So I snapped it up because if Seidensticker thought it was good, then it must be good. I don't know for sure, but I am a big fan of Seidensticker. But when I peeked into this one, I thought, this looks really darn good. And I won't see a copy of this again for such a price. So I picked it up, and yes, I have it. So maybe I really should get out of my Runciman rut. I've been reading books by Stephen Runciman. I should get out of my Runciman rut and get into some more compelling fiction. So I will leave that there. I think Pat is afraid to tag me because I can't open my mouth without going on for at least a half hour, if not much longer than that. So that is my version of the tag, the Bring Browsing Back book tag. I wish now that I could browse in those old bookstores. When I'm in another city, it's happened more than once on the California coast. There have been bookstores in which I was able to browse and I found good stuff. In Chicago, there's nothing. Possibly if I were to get over to the University of Chicago neighborhood more often, I would find things there, but not in my neck of the woods. Going up to this bookshop in Evanston is a treat, however, because he does have works that are not your typical fare. He's choosy about what he takes in. You can often find a Library of America edition for say $10, which is very nice. I think that was where I bought USA by Dos Passos, which I also hope to get to one of these days. My reading has really slowed down tremendously with just the humidity and then other things going on with summer, but hopefully we'll pick up sometime soon. So, thank you very much for stopping by my channel.